Hello and welcome back. For assignment 2 in the spreadsheet section, you're going to just be using the spreadsheet to create different types of graphs. And I'm just going to go through a couple with you and talk about some of the quirks with Quattro Pro and actually both programs, Google Docs as well. So if you want to create a graph, what you need to do is you need to highlight the information you want graph. So I'm just going to graph the first two columns, so name, first grade in English for you, and change that to for you. So when we go to graph, you select that area, and you can do it a couple of ways. I always like to go insert chart. Now the joys of Google Doc or for Quattro Pro is it doesn't always come out with the right graph for us. So you need to select the correct one. So there's a bunch of graphs here we can pick from. You can pick an area graph. Not so sure that shows the information best, and that's going to be one of your tasks when you go through the assignment 2 is determining which graph best displays the data. So you're going through and you're picking which one you think looks the best. And we can manipulate some of the spacing a little bit. So there's a bunch of options with the 3D. You'll find bubble, for example, there's not enough data for that. And you get that anytime the program there's not enough information, it'll tell you that. Line graph will work here, and there's a whole bunch of different line graphs. You can change the direction, and the same with the bar graph. If I go back to the bar graph will let you change it. And you can see Quattro Pro is a little bit frustrating because it doesn't match up with the picture I'm pointing to. But that's some of the idiosyncrasies that you kind of get used to. So let's see if I can get back to bar. There we go. So you can see that bar graph, when it was like this, the names at the bottom, tightly spaced together, but the bar graph does show a nice distribution of the marks. However, the one on its side, much clearer with the names, numbers a little bit easier. So now you go back down to the next button. So when I was back here, I just hit next, and then I hit next once I've picked a graph that I think looks nice. Now I can add the titles, marks in ENG for you. Subtitle, you can leave it blank. On the x-axis, the x-axis is always the axis across the bottom. We'll put grade. Oh, now this is kind of funny because I have it going on its side. The names are still on the x-axis, so it's kind of funny how Quattro Pro does that. The y-axis then would be mark or grade. And I've got those filled out, and when you tab you can see everything placed. You can go next, and you can change the scheme. Just be careful when you're going to insert this maybe in your report that these solid colors don't print out so nice. The gray marble is fine. The color washes are also alright. It seems to copy and paste fine. So you hit finish. And now you get the funny little icon here with a little bit of a picture of a graph. And what you do is you just select a region on your chart and let go. So I just held the right mouse button down and let it go. And now we get the graph. Okay? So that's how you would create a graph with Quattro Pro. If I wanted to do the data management column, it's frustrating because if you hold control down, so I highlight the names, and I hold control button, I can highlight another column. However, when I want to go to graph, so I hit insert chart, it says there's no information selected. If you do this in Excel, if you're bringing your own machine to work on and you have Excel, this works fine. With Quattro Pro, what we need to do is you have to move the information we want to use. You select it and you can just move it, and it's got to be beside the name. So it's one of those things that are very frustrating with Quattro Pro. There are ways around it. You just end up moving the columns around. So, and you can always insert columns. So what I do is I go up to the C until I get this funny arrow. I now right click, and if I want to insert cell, I can get a new one in there. So you're never if you haven't left a space, you can always make space. So that's not a big deal, and you can go ahead and graph it the same as we did before. So you highlight, insert, chart, hit next, and then you have your graphs to choose from, and whichever one you would prefer. All right. So I'm going to cancel that one. What happens if we want to list multiple information? So bringing this back across. So multiple information. Let's say I want to look at the marks spread across 3 courses. So I just highlight all of them, and I would go Insert, Chart. Next, and now I want to pick a graph that best shows the information. So you can see this bar graph. The red is data management, the yellow is English, and the green is the Miss Cummings course. Now, it doesn't show the spread real well because what it's done is it's broken it from 0 to 100%, and that's not really what those marks represent. They are out of 100, so it's not really the right type of bar graph. So when you play around, you get a different type of bar graph. This one allows you to have all 3 courses listed, but it doesn't show up nice in that direction. If we go this way, we can now see each student, and you can clearly see which course is being discussed in what we call the legend. And it shows their consistency, and everyone's doing well. It looks like everyone's around that 80 mark. Now, what's kind of funny is it goes up to 120, and I'll talk about that in a second. So anyway, I'm going to pick that one. Some of the other ones, you can go with the 3D if you want. Not always my favorite. There's nothing really wrong with them. It depends on how well they print. If it prints in color, it's not so bad. If it's grayscale, really tough to read for the viewer. So it's nice. The 2D is still nice in terms of being able to watch it or look at it in a report. Next, so title, students and marks. You can always go back and add this in after. If you forget or over tab or you hit next too many times, you can go back and enter it in after. It's not too late if you've hit finish. It's not a big deal. And that one's not too bad. So I hit finish, and again, see the little funny icon. So I will left click, hold the button down, and you draw and make your box. And there's my graph, and I can move this graph around. Now, both graphs, they go to 120 on the y-axis. If I click on the numbers, so I just take the pointer, click on one of the numbers, and I right-click, you get a whole bunch of information. You go to y-axis properties, and this is where you can change a couple things. What I want to talk about is the scale. So when you hit scale, I don't want it going above 100 because you can't get a mark over 100 anymore. So I'll cap that at 100. Minimum, here that's up to you because we're doing grades. It's 0 to 100 is your average scale. And you can change the increment, how often it shows on the y-axis. So I can go with an increment of 20. And what happens is if you look on the y-axis here, it goes up by 20s, which shows a little bit more detail. Basically, you want to pick detail such that it's easy for the viewer to read. You can click on the legend and edit the legend properties. So anytime you want to change something, let's say you don't like your title, click on it, right click, and you can go to titles, and you go back to this, and you can add in a subtitle now if you thought of one, or you can get rid of one or change it. So there's nothing, if you've chosen to do something, it's never the end of the world. And you can move these around. So what's going to happen when you do your survey, you're going to have tons and tons of data here, columns, and you're going to be creating graphs. So you're going to be kind of storing graphs. It's going to become a bit of a managing task, making sure graphs that you want or help your report are kept, and then you can copy and paste them into whatever program you're using to write it up. Now, for those that are using the Google Docs, not much of a different lesson here. So again, if you copy and paste the data, remember you have to use Control-C and Control-V. It's a little funny that way. Graphing, though, it doesn't really change other than you need to you insert chart down here. And it's a different order. So Google Docs seems to recommend a best chart, and that's fine, but you can still change it. There's no problems there. You pick the one that you feel best looks the way you want it. You can click across, and they give you more options. So there's tabs across the top. So if you want to go to a scatter plot, and they're saying there's not enough information, which makes sense. Okay, you can stack it, which doesn't make any sense, but you can do that. Customize. It allows you then to put a whole bunch of stuff in here. So chart title, students and marks. And you can see the change gets made right away. The legend, you can locate the legend, and that's the MDM for you. And there's a whole bunch of options. It's very, very similar, just it's in a different format. Again, it's frustrating. I'm so used to with Excel. Google Docs doesn't even allow that control function to work. So if you do want to use, say you want to look at your English marks, what I would do is insert one left, one right, doesn't matter, and just take those and you would, oops, I guess you have to cut and then paste and then do the graph using your English marks in the names. So you're going to find probably it's going to be a little bit more challenging for the Google Docs unless you've used them before, but it works very, very similar. So I'm just going to do a chart with multiple, just to show like the area graph looks pretty, but it's not very easy for people to interpret. Again, for us, that bar graph for this particular context seems to work just nice. And again, you can have all your options, you can change it, and so on and so forth. So the assignment 2 is basically giving you an opportunity to play around with some data and work with the spreadsheets and so on and so forth, because you are going to have to use that for the project. It's going to be frustrating for the first little bit, and once you get more comfortable with it and find out the quirks with the programs. Neither one's perfect. Excel is very, very good, so if you bring your own laptop in that has Excel, but it's not perfect. They don't always do what you want because the programmers are trying to make sure it works for the general public. So anyway, go ahead, give assignment 2 a try, and if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Good luck.